All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is part 2 of my study habits series. This is the principle of charity and how to be creative. So, if you ever pay attention to advertisements, you'll often see creativity as kind of a buzzword. Many schools in my neighborhood, for example, promise that they will have creative education. Okay? Hagwons in my neighborhood promise that if you send your children to them, they will give them creative thinking lessons. Large companies often say that they are committed to creative solutions. Think of Apple or Google, especially in tech companies. Okay? And even the government passes laws that are designed to encourage creativity, or to boost creativity, or to make Korea more creative. However, the problem with this is it's very difficult to know what people actually mean when they say creativity. So, let's start with what creativity isn't. There's this idea that creative people wear very colorful clothes and they go out into the forest and they look at the flowers and ideas just come to them. It's this genius connection to the spiritual world, or it's flashes of inspiration. And while this is possible, it almost never happens. Okay? This idea here, out of the blue, this idea that creativity is artistic and automatic and just sort of happens, is this idea that creativity comes out of the blue. And this is almost certainly not true for most people, most of the time. On the other hand, the more realistic view of creativity is the idea of a remix. This is a musical term, and what it means, for example, if you guys like hip-hop, a lot of hip-hop songs take parts of other songs and mix them together. This is called remixing. And the term in music has a very specific meaning, but it's generally how creativity works in other fields as well. So, if we think that creativity is a process of remixing, mostly, combining new ideas in new ways, it leads us to the question of how can we become more creative? If creativity is out of the blue, I have no idea how to become more creative. No clue. However, if creativity is the process of remixing, I have 2 main suggestions. Suggestion number 1 is to expand your background knowledge. If you have more background knowledge, there are more things that you can mix together in new ways. This is something that you can find very commonly when you read the biographies of creative people. So, for example, the Korean director Park Chan-wook, his movies, in my opinion, are some of the most creative movies ever made. And they start with his interest in philosophy. Similarly, the Pulitzer Prize-winning author Ernest Hemingway took a lot of inspiration from hunting, fishing, history, and boxing. Likewise, former Prime Minister Angela Merkel, who many people consider the best politician of the early 21st century, she drew on her experiences as a chemist a physicist, a spy, and as an important member of her own religious community. This is not accidental. These creative people get their creative ideas because they can access so many sources of background information. As such, step number one, when you want to be more creative, is to make your knowledge broader, not just deeper. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We are going to be talking about how to expand background knowledge. So, the first recommendation I have for expanding your background knowledge is to simply become more curious. Many of us feel that the world is boring or that there's nothing new or interesting. In my opinion, this is a failure of imagination. And I think I can prove this with a simple example. This is a remote control. Most of us, myself included, most days, would look at this and not give it a second thought. It's a remote control. Who cares? Whatever. But if you practice being curious, this remote control is absolutely full of new things to learn. It is absolutely full of things that you can use to expand your background knowledge. For example, if you press here, this is designed to open and let you use the batteries. Well, how do you think they made the latching device? Who designed it? How did they test it? Why did they choose this design instead of a different design? Looking at the front, you can see that these buttons are made out of a soft rubber. Why did they choose rubber instead of plastic? I don't know. Also, remote controls are usually used in houses. Houses have food and drinks and cat hair and children who make things dirty. So, when they were designing this remote control, how did they design it to resist cat hair and sticky soda and dust and children doing disgusting things? Okay? I'm sure that someone spent many hours working on this problem. Also, if we look here, we see that this is a very specific pattern of buttons. Somebody spent a very long time carefully planning where each button goes. Why do you think they chose this pattern? How does this pattern make it easier for you to use the remote control? Why did they choose this symbol to change the input? And why did they choose this symbol for power? This remote control, a perfectly normal device, if you really pay attention to it, has hundreds of hours of very intelligent people doing very difficult work to make it work perfectly. And the more time you spend paying attention to these things, the more background knowledge you will gain almost automatically. Okay, and it's not just remote controls. Now, right here I have scissors. Okay. This is also a complicated engineering problem. Somebody spent many, many hours designing this. Paper clips. Somebody made this the perfect size and the perfect kind of metal so that you can bend it. You can bend it like that without breaking it. This was a chemist working very hard for very many hours. Things like this are everywhere. So, the first step to background knowledge is simply to make yourself more curious. The second step I would recommend is to read widely. Most people, when they read, they tend to read in one or two genres. There's nothing wrong with this. However, I think that one of the best ways we can become more creative is to expand the number of subjects we read about. One of the things I do is pick up books at random. Sometimes I go to the library and I choose a section that I've never been to, and I grab the first book I see. This is almost guaranteed to teach me something new and expand my background. I brought 3 examples. Sitting here on my desk, I have this book full of academic articles about civil law in Korea in 2022. Next to it, I have a book of essays. This is Jisikwa Gyoyang, Knowledge and Culture. In it, there are essays about COVID-19, psychological health, technology classes, and film education. Finally, I have this book here, which is Korean Civilization from Gojo-sun to Goryeo. Now, when you first look at this, it seems like they are unrelated. Seems random. However, if we are using background knowledge correctly, we can actually create a new and creative way to understand the law in South Korea through these 3 books that I chose at random. So, what I would do, I would start here and I would read about the legal framework in Shilla and Goryeo. Once I have an understanding of the legal foundations of these ancient Korean civilizations, then I can go to my civil law book here, and I can trace the effects of Goryeo and Shilla law and culture into 2022. I can see what has changed, I can see what has stayed the same. Then I take my understanding and I look at how Korea is doing education right now, and I can understand how Korean values have caused the changes from Goryeo and Shilla to the present. And I chose these books entirely at random. You can do this almost always, and I recommend you do. The 2 best methods I know of, like I said, number 1, going to a library or bookstore and picking things at random. The second way you can do it, if you prefer to use a computer, is Wikipedia, Wikibikoto. NamuWiki is also fine. In these articles, they have lots and lots of links. I usually open up about 20 of them. Go through, read them. Anything that interests you, click the link. This will lead you from topic to topic to topic to topic. And after a couple hours, I promise you will learn something new. Finally, I strongly suggest that you participate in social clubs and discussion groups. The reason for this is social clubs and discussion groups are run by people who think differently. For example, right now I participate in weightlifting classes, okay, a philosophy group, a fiction writing group, a theology group, and a community of people who build race cars. Obviously, the people in these groups have different worldviews. They have different experiences, and they have different ways to interpret the world around them. When I participate in these groups, I can learn how they think. When I can learn how they think, I have more background knowledge, and I have more tools for becoming a creative person. For you, I recommend you do something similar. Colleges are full of social clubs. I recommend that you choose not just more than one club, but clubs that are in very different topics, clubs that are very different from each other. So, after you have expanded your background knowledge, the next tool I want to recommend is the principle of charity. If you want to look up this principle in Korean, it is Jabie Wanchik, and actually on Naver, if you search for Jabie Wanchik, there's Jisikin, and they have a pretty good article explaining the idea. Anyway, the principle of charity is a tool that is used by logical experts, historians, scientists, legal professionals, and philosophers. The reason we do this is to minimize bias, minimize lazy thinking, and maximize openness to new ideas. This is a very good tool for creativity and learning in general. The reason it's such a good tool is because it corrects a natural weakness in human thinking. And this is a weakness we all have. We are often too judgmental. So, according to the neuroscientist Dr. Steven Novella, the most common way for people to make new opinions, or for people to judge new opinions, is the following. Number one, react emotionally. Either, ooh, I like that, or, ugh, I don't like that. This has no thought at all. It's a purely an emotional reaction. Number two, after making the emotional reaction, you create a judgment. Okay? So, emotion, judgment. Third, this is where people start thinking. And the way that they use thinking is rationalization. Rationalization in Korean is hamnihwa, which means that instead of trying to find the truth, we are trying to justify the emotional, judgmental opinions that we made without thinking. Okay, this is normal, and honestly, in many cases, it's not even bad. However, if we want to develop ourselves more, if we want to become more open to new ideas, if we want to become more creative, it's important that we learn how to control this natural tendency. So, where we naturally react emotionally first, in the principle of charity, we have to assume that the other person, the other opinion, the other idea is from an intelligent person, whether you agree with it or disagree with it. Number two, instead of judging, you have to assume that the other person has good intentions. And instead of rationalizing, you have to assume that they have good reasons. So, when someone tells you an opinion and you use the principle of charity, instead of focusing on, I like this, I don't like this, you should focus on this question. How can an intelligent, good person think hard and come up with this idea? Now, this is unnatural, but you can learn it. And when you do learn it, it really opens your mind to a whole new way of thinking. In order to demonstrate, I'm going to invite Tom back up here again, and he and I are going to do a dialectic 2 times. The first time we do the dialectic, sorry, by the way, dialectic is Byeonjung-bop. Okay? The first time we do the dialectic, I will behave normally. I will have an emotional reaction, then I will make a judgment, and then I will rationalize my decision. In the second dialectic, I'm going to use the principle of charity. Please pay attention to the differences, and please think about how much more I will learn when I use the principle of charity. All right, so here's my friend Tom, and once more we're going to have a dialectic, Byeonjung-bop, and we are going to talk about this idea right here. Reading and writing are bad for learning. In this dialogue, Tom is going to be the teacher, and I will be the student, and I am going to be emotional, judgmental, and rationalizing. So, let's start and see what you think.
Ben,
Yes?
what do you think of the idea that reading and writing hold back the learning process?
Well, I think that's stupid.
Okay, can you tell me why you think that's stupid?
I mean, everyone knows that you have to, study in a book or study on a tablet. If you're gonna study, you need written things because if you can't read, you're probably kind of a stupid person. So it's a really bad. I don't like it.
Okay, well, I think you've made one leap initially as well.
Okay.
So why do you feel that the person who came up with this idea can't read and write, first of all?
Well, if they couldn't read and write, obviously they would want to.
Okay, so that every skill and ability you have is one that you would enjoy exercising.
I just think that I think this person was probably immature and not very good at reading.
Okay, do you know who came up with this idea?
I don't know, one of your students who got an F.
No, I don't give out Fs unless I can not avoid it. This was Socrates.
Socrates.
Socrates said this.
I am so confused.
Does this change how you feel about this opinion? Or this premise?
I didn't know that Socrates was stupid.
Okay, again, you're leaping to that conclusion.
Oh, okay. You don't think I should?
Well, I think you should think about what he meant rather than just decide that because he said this, he was not smart.
So what you're saying is that I should use the principle of charity, Tom?
I think you should.
Okay. All right, so we are going to try the dialectic, Byeonjung, one more time. This time, Tom is still my teacher, but I am going to use the principle of charity to investigate this idea that reading and writing are bad for learning. Please pay attention and decide for yourself whether you think this dialogue is better for background information and better for creative thinking. Okay? Tom, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
So Ben, what do you think of the idea that reading and writing can interfere with the learning process?
I would say that's a very surprising opinion. But why?
Well,
Why would a person think this?
So, when you write something down, first of all, what happens to your retention of that idea? Do you keep it in memory as well?
Well, no, I don't have to. It's written down, so I can just, go look at the paper again.
Okay. So, you don't keep it in mind in the same way when it's written down, is that right?
So what you're saying is that when we rely on writing and reading too much, we don't develop our own memories.
That's part of it, absolutely.
Okay.
So,
That's a good point.
not just we don't remember so much, but if we don't have it in our mind, are we processing or thinking about the idea as much?
Well, if you forget, you can't think about it. That's a really good point. Okay. All right.
So-
Is there any other reason?
Sure. So, when you have an idea written down,
Mm-hmm.
a record, a hard copy that is not going to be edited,
Mm-hmm.
can that idea still develop and change if it's frozen on the page?
Oh, well, I mean, you can always edit, but it's definitely, it's harder.
Mm.
Because if we just keep the idea spoken, it's very easy for us to make adjustments and changes.
Mm.
But, you know, if it's in a book, we have to make a whole new book. So that, okay, yeah, so it seems like when an idea is being spoken, it's a lot more alive.
Mm. Alive and flexible, and the person you're talking to, are you able to analyze the idea more with them than you are with a book?
Oh yeah, that's true, because you can read their body language, and you can ask them about their feelings, and you can, it's a much deeper interaction. That's a good point.
So you can ask questions, you can make suggestions of your own, you can think about different angles than the ones represented in the book.
That's a good point. So yeah, when ideas are written down, they definitely become less flexible. That's a good point. Okay.
And how about the way you learn from written material, or one of the ways that it is possible to learn from written material?
Oh man. Well, you know, sometimes when I read a book, I read it deeply or I read it for pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes when I read a book, like for example, when I was doing my university entrance exam, I just tried to memorize everything.
How did that feel?
I hated it.
And how effective was it? How effective was it for longer term learning?
As soon as the test was finished, I forgot everything.
Okay, so you found the experience less pleasurable,
Yes.
less rewarding or effective long term.
Yes.
So if we're looking at learning not just as not just for the end goal of a test,
Mm-hmm.
but as a process in itself, as part of becoming a more enriched person, say.
I see what you're saying. So, okay. Now, I'm looking here, and the person who came up with this idea, there are many intelligent reasons to believe this that we've just discovered, and I did not expect. Good intentions? Yeah, it seems like this person wants us to study more effectively. They want us to have better memories. You know, they want us to have more flexibility, improving ideas. So these are definitely good intentions. And the reasons we're talking about, yeah, I mean, it seems like this person
It can be valid.
really thought this through. Now, I don't know if I completely agree, but you know, I'm probably not going to go to my house and throw my books away.
I'm glad for that.
But you know, maybe I should not only rely on my books, or not only rely on my phone or my tablet.
Think about not just the written word, but also the exchanged word.
Yeah. So maybe I should take the ideas out of the book and let them live a little bit.
Absolutely.
All right. Wow. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Thank you for watching my lecture on creativity and background knowledge. To sum up, what I suggest you do is read widely to get as much background information as you can. Be curious, interact with the world around you, pay attention to scissors and erasers and leaves and teeth and hair. And finally, learn to use the principle of charity. If you do these three things, you will have much more material to remix creatively, and you will have the flexibility so that when you do remix, you won't be afraid. Thank you for listening. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Good luck with your studies.